Welcome everyone to Plastic Arts Podcast. My name is Fonzie. I'm joined by my co-host, indie game dev extraordinaire Gavin Jones. We have Garrick Campsey on the phone with us live. He's developer of LAZR. You've seen footage. It's a super dope looking, 2D Clothformer, you call it. And we're really happy to sit down and talk to you.
I've never heard
Hey,
of
thanks
that.
for having me. I'm really excited.
Nice to meet you. And so Clothformer, talk to us about how you, coined that phrase. I want to know more about that.
So originally, I was challenged by a programmer and friend online to add cloth into a platformer. And once I did that and started playing around with it and posting different kinds of media online, I got feedback from the community, and somebody in the community actually called it a Clothformer before I did. So I really like that name, and I decided, well, let's go with that. If the community comes up with a fun name, you try and use that momentum that they have and those ideas that they have. So I just went ahead and adopted that name, Clothformer.
Gotcha. Okay, but there's no other game or other thing I can think of that's using that term, right? That seems like that's
So
related.
It's
to this
great
game.
for an elevator pitch, if nothing else. Like you say that to a developer, and they're like, "I'm sorry, what?"
Right. You just say
In
it's a
the
Clothformer, and you
world.
walk away. They go, "Hey, hold on."
Did you just say?
Nice. So let's. We want to get to know you behind the game a little bit more too, and then we'll talk about LAZR as well for sure. But just your history in game dev, where you started, and eventually get to where you are now.
Sure. In high school, I got interested in math and physics and web design. And then out of high school, I began working as a Flash developer, making Flash websites. And that got me a job at a startup. And I worked at the startup in the art department, designing user interfaces and websites. And then I eventually graduated to doing more graphic design and print. And then I learned 3D, and I was doing product design in 3D. Then I got interested in visual effects and started working on films. And I did a few films. I did visual effects for a few films. So I kind of got an idea about how that whole process worked. The startup that I worked for at the time was a risk management company. So I learned a little bit about how to understand and manage things that could go wrong, or different assets of a business. So I have a little bit of experience with that, and figuring out how to get things done. After I did visual effects for films for a while, I watched Indie Game the movie, and it was a really big inspiration. So I started studying game design and got into C# around 2012 and XNA, and I've been working with XNA and monogame since then. The very first time I was able to write a short little game and put it on my console and play it on the screen with the controller in my hand, I was really hooked on that whole process, and I've been doing that ever since. I've spent about 7 years in monogame now, since 2012, 2013, and I'm real happy with where I am right now.
So something that's almost interesting. You said almost interesting. That's a hell of a starter to a question. Let me ask you an almost good question here. No, but Indie Game the movie was a movie almost entirely about 2D platformers, and your movie, God, your game is a fantastic 2D platformer. Is that kind of your almost favorite genre? And that movie is super inspiring to so many people, but is that really the genre that kind of calls to you the most, and that's something that really gives you fond memories of your childhood? And is there something?
So LAZR's the first platformer that I've ever really written. I wrote a prototype before it that kind of put cloth and platforming together just to see if the idea would be fun. LAZR is an iteration of that prototype. So I guess it's technically the second platformer I wrote. But platforming isn't really the genre that I am in love with, or that I think is my preferred genre. My preferred genre is a top-down Zelda style game, like action adventure. But I like blending ideas from top-down action adventure games like Link to the Past with other genres like platforming. So, for example, in Zelda, you have a inventory, and I thought, well, it'd be cool to have an inventory in a platformer as well, and that's where the idea for mods kind of came from. So you can apply different mods, and that gives the player choice. So you have a lot of different options for how you want to attack a problem or a puzzle. I think giving the player a lot of options is something that action adventure games do well, like Zelda. So merging those ideas together is, I think, is going to have a lot of really cool repercussions.
Gotcha.
One thing I'd like to kind of comment, at least on my personal experience with the loadout system, is so the game is obviously LAZR is very hard, clearly by choice. And it at least for me, when I was playing through the demo, I found that if I was struggling and I was getting frustrated, I would just change up my loadout a little bit. Was that sort of something that, and I go back into it and I wasn't as frustrated. Did you found that to be something you did intentionally, or was that just sort of a lucky thing that kind of happened with the design choice you'd made to have the multiple loadouts?
So originally the mods weren't part of the design. It was just you could shoot lasers and you could jump in the air and you could dash around and slide and stuff. But over time I found that when I altered the hero's mass, it drastically changed how she moved in game, and I found that to be fun. So I wanted to figure out how to make her lighter, but also keep her at a normal mass, and then give the player options to choose between those things. And then once I made that first shell variation that was like, oh, you're lighter and you can jump a little bit further, but you have -1 health, it really kind of opened the door to, oh, I can have all kinds of different mods. I could have rapid fire. I could add performance mods on. So as soon as I started playing with it, I discovered that it was too much fun, and this had to be, expanded upon.
Yeah, no, and with the development of LAZR, how long have you been kind of toying around and playing with it?
So the very first prototype for LAZR I wrote in a week. It was about 4,000 lines. I put it out there. It was like a fun little Mario clone. And then I worked on some other things. And then I came back to it, and I put about 2 months more work into it to kind of see, can this be developed into something that is more unique, and does this have something to offer? And then about 2 months into there, I posted a video on Twitter. It went viral, got a lot of views, and then that's when I decided, oh, I should probably work on this full time. There's a lot of potential here. So that's kind of how it all came together.
Something I really kind of appreciated when I was playing it is it feels like there's a lot of references to other stuff, specifically like not cyberpunk-ish, but what
like sci-fi, kind of
sort of
movies?
Almost Blade Runner-ish, whatever. Yeah,
that I get
sort
strong.
of
Yeah,
vibe
Matrix,
is.
Blade Runner vibes.
So, are there some other references in there I might be missing? Like, what are some of the big inspirations to that art style that you're bringing to this game?
So, a lot of the art style comes from films. It's very heavily influenced by Blade Runner. So, lots of really dark blues and a really dark city with fog and rain. Lots of backlighting, lots of neon. So I would say that Blade Runner is the primary visual inspiration for LAZR. But in a more general sense, LAZR draws from the cyberpunk aesthetic, which would include Ghost in the Shell, Judge Dredd, just a lot of other really great and amazing films and anime.
Oh yeah, no, that's art. I mean, we're always building on stuff before. Like, you can't create anything in a vacuum.
Right.
You gotta take support.
Well, it sort of reminds me of like one of like Mark Brown's design principles on like nostalgia, which is like it works best if you're pulling from tons and tons of different resources, because otherwise you're just trying to imitate one thing. Now you're trying to you're just bringing everyone right back to kind of where they were when they were a kid, when they first saw that. And I think it's really, really powerful the way you're doing it.
Now, with I imagine you can tell your publisher, hey, I got to do some research here, and you can just watch a couple of movies for the day, like, build some inspiration.
I think something I was very curious about the readability. One of the things this game has is big explosions. These are not small. They're going to fill the screen. I know
That's gonna make Michael Bay go, what? Like, I just, like, see that. Like, damn.
One of the things I was particularly impressed with this demo is so on that kind of last stage before the bike, where it's all platforming and no combat really, is tons of explosions while you're. I mean, because I played through it many times before I finally got through it, so you get really fast. And there's all these huge explosions going off, but it was still. I was never lost. I was clear. I knew where my character was. Is there something that with the how are you kind of keeping things clear while still having mass explosions, mass hysteria, cats and dogs, right?
So a big part of that is color. The hero is pink, and the things that she can interact with are generally pink in some way, or they have a really strong blue outline, and then all the explosions are kept very limited in color. They are red, orange, and yellow with smoke that is created that goes from gray to really dark black. And I found that using color to keep those ideas separated made it a little bit easier visually to track on screen, because you want to make sure that everything's readable and the player can very easily understand what's happening when there's a lot of stuff going on.
With color being a big way to separate your character from what's happening on screen, what are your thoughts with adding some kind of colorblind option or mode into LAZR?
Yes, I would definitely like to add a colorblind mode. I know that my strategy for separating colors is going to fail when players are colorblind. So I really want to focus on accessibility in future updates because I'd like as many people as possible to play LAZR.
I highly respect that you're conscious of that and you're taking initiative and you're going to work on that. A lot of game devs are. I see a movement with, they're really trying to be responsive and making sure they have the right control scheme or that's manipulative or, like the color thing as well. Like that's cool that you're doing that.
Yeah. Like even the font in general throughout the game is very, very big. So that, just really makes
font's
sense.
big. Like 2019 was the year of the font. Like that's when everyone was on Twitter going, hey, I can't read this. And like, okay.
Yeah.
With I'm curious with the theme, the kind of storyline within LAZR. Did you have that kind of in your back pocket, the story you wanted to tell? Was that something you created afterwards, trying to pair the right visual or the right storyline with LAZR? Or is that kind of a story you always wanted to create in the first place?
So originally, LAZR didn't really have a story. I just had the idea of a platformer and cloth. And how do I know it's fun to play around with. How do I make this a game? How do I add gameplay to this? So a big part of that was leaning on traditional platforming ideas. I really love Zelda. I really love games that tell stories. So once I had cloth and platforming together, it was really about figuring out, well, who is the hero? Where does she live? What is the story that's being told? And I'm developing LAZR as I go, which gives me a lot of freedom in making all these separate systems a little bit more cohesive. If I have an idea for the game that looks really cool, like let's say there's a bunch of fog, fog looks great and explosions look cool. How do I add fog and explosions into the game? Well, as a writer, I can step back into the story and I can say, well, the city's covered in fog and there's a corporation that builds explosives. So I have a lot of freedom to move back and forth between sections of development that are usually separate.
Well, I will say that kind of is how like my favorite influential game of all time, Conker's Bad Fur. It's kind of how they did their stories. They went through, they did the whole thing, developed it, made all the levels, and then they just kind of went back through with the story and made everything connect. And the end result, you have the absolute perfect story because you're just like, oh, well, we built it all in tandem. We just gave it a second pass, and it kind of comes out perfect.
Nice. I need to give Conker's Bad Fur Day a replay because I never really gave it a chance, when it actually came out. But
it's so good. So something that's sort of unique to this game that really we haven't talked to anyone that's worked on a game like this before, and it is sort of rare in the industry, is this is sort of almost the subgenre of a platformer, which is an ultra hard. You can kind of almost throw it in there with almost like a Bashi, or we were trying to figure out the name of that, 990,000 lives. It's one of those really hard you earn it. Like when you beat that level, you've memorized it, you've got the movement down tight, you got to get good to beat it. Is this something I know particularly on Twitch and YouTube, really people just eat it up. Is this something you found, like people playing the demo at all? Has this kind of caught fire at all a little bit with those audiences? Is this something that is sort of kind of working out to your advantage in that rate yet?
Absolutely. Whenever somebody plays the game, I'm always analyzing how they're playing the game and trying to understand what's difficult for them and what they're having challenges with. One of my favorite feelings is watching somebody get it, like learning how to dash and learning how to climb. It's like a light bulb kind of lights up in their eyes when everything kind of clicks together. So that's my favorite feeling. I really don't like it when people don't understand things or don't understand how to play it. And that to me is a failure on my part because I need to explain it better or I need to give more hints in some way. So yes, I'm always watching players and how they interact and respond to the game and thinking of ways in which I can make the game better and easier to play and funner to play without lowering the difficulty of the game. And that's really the trick.
And that is something I thought was particularly exciting that I didn't even learn about until just before this interview. Is sort of this is kind of being built for speedrunners in that sense, and I think especially the shell system. It's gonna really, I think, surprise everyone when this comes out and the speedrunning community gets of it. They're gonna think of things that you didn't think of, we didn't think of, nobody thought of. Is there anything else with that kind of community that sort of surprised you already?
Yeah, I absolutely love the speedrunning community. I study them. I watch YouTube videos on how they break games and how they use glitches and different strategies to complete games faster. I really like the speedrunning community. I think they're very dedicated to pushing what's possible, pushing the limits of every game they can get their hands on. And that has influenced how I write code. I've actually studied the way that collision systems are done in Super Mario 64. And I've written my collision system around the idea of not being able to clip into walls because speedrunners will actually use a few techniques in that game to move through walls by building up their speed. So yeah, I study them. I love the speedrunning community, and LAZR's really designed for them. It's a very difficult game to glitch and to break, so that makes it a bit more fair. So if you set a record now, in 6 months' time, that record could be broken if somebody discovers a glitch. So the idea is to try and keep the game as glitch-free as possible. But you can't guarantee 100% no glitches. But I've put a lot of effort into designing LAZR specifically for the speedrunning community.
Yeah, I think we talked before about, because especially recently with AGDQ, with it, I feel like they have this real momentum. They're growing super fast because they realize not only is there a huge community of people that want to speedrun, but also want to watch speedruns, and it's just blowing up right now.
And one random, this is a nitpick compliment, but I really appreciate that the actual low res is low res. Like there's no half. It didn't seem like, from what I could tell, there's no half pixels. Like when you look at the rain dropping down and hitting, the way it pixelates properly. I just really appreciate not enough games really do that. You'll have like diagonal pixels and whatnot. It's like that's not proper low resolution. That's just faking it.
Yes, absolutely. I love pixel art. I love the retro style. I grew up in the 90s. During the time, I was actually born in 85, but I grew up in the 90s during the time where Super Nintendo kind of reigned in the US. They had the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the N64. That was really my childhood. So I'm heavily influenced by Nintendo and Super Nintendo games. So yeah, I looked at that style and I said, what kind of modern ideas can we put into these older games like depth of field, fog, alpha blending? There's a lot of different really cool stuff that the Super Nintendo just couldn't do. And then we transitioned into 3D and everybody just kind of forgot about 2D for a while. and now we're kind of rediscovering it and we're getting back to it. And there's just a lot of stuff that we really haven't explored or tried with 2D. So I really like this modern high bit style, and I'm really interested in exploring it and seeing what's possible.
The decisions that you seem to be making with the development process, whether it be the tools that you're using too, or how LAZR looks, it feels like you're following your own path. You're trying to not to compromise on your goals. Is that a concept that's important to you as far as, you know, sticking with your vision and trying not to bend to others? Is that something that you almost like following in your lifestyle as well, but also like how you handle development work?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's very important to think for yourself and to not just do something because everybody else is doing it. Like, it may seem easier in the moment to just listen to somebody tell you what to do, but over a long enough period of time, eventually they're not going to be there, and you're going to have to figure out how to do this stuff on your own. So to me, it made sense to learn monogame and learn game engines from the ground up. So I wasn't relying on a tutorial. I wasn't relying on a YouTube video. I wasn't relying on a colleague or anyone else. There wasn't any external factors that could limit what I could make or create. So really, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to doing it myself, figuring out my own way, and not compromising. You know, I want to work with other people, but I want people to work with me using my workflows, because they're very fast and they allow for iteration. And, you know, I've been doing this for a while, and I've kind of got things figured out the way that I want them to work. So.
Gotcha. Now, is that focus for really making everything efficient? Is that also to give you more room to control what this game is available to be, you know, released on? So if you make sure it's not bloated and increasing in file size, which maybe those other, you know, other tools really kind of put you in that, they force you to end up just like adding and creating these huge file sizes, or really trying to strip it down and make it super efficient so you can release it on whatever you want?
Absolutely. Keeping file sizes small really helps LAZR, because I load everything at once when LAZR is booted up pretty much. All data is loaded. All the textures and all the sounds go right into RAM. And that gives me the benefit of never having to really load anything from disk later on. So when you change a level, there's no loading screen. It's already in RAM. It just has to move from RAM to cache to CPU. So that was one of the design principles very early on, is I wanted to fit everything into RAM, and that required modifying the sample rate and bit depth of WAV files and the music going on, pretty much making the music smaller, and figuring out ways to build sprite sheets that were densely packed and well designed, so that I could reduce the total number of draw calls and just make it as fast and as efficient as possible. That's kind of a design goal, is to make things as efficient as possible. And that has a lot of really good positive repercussions when you follow that path.
Gotcha. Were you, I guess, go ahead, Gavin.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think one of the tricky bits with this a game that is sort of an ultra hard, right, is kind of balancing it. And we did, to my understanding, before, or the build I played was a bit toned down from the previous build. And I imagine, as far as artistic vision, that's a very tough tightrope to walk, because you really want it to be super hard, but also somebody does have to beat this darn thing. How has that kind of been, walking this tightrope and kind of balancing it? Like, what's that experience been like with a game like this?
Absolutely. So this is my opinion, but for every game, there's really two phases of playing the game. There's, you play through the mission, you play through the story, whatever, and then you get to the end of the game. And that's phase one. That's when you're kind of learning the game, when you're mastering it. And then phase two is once you've beaten the game, and that's the end game. And we see this in like online, socially driven games. The end game is where most people will spend most of their time, if they continue to play it after they've beaten it. So what I really wanted to do with the demo is I wanted to give people 2 levels as a tutorial and an introduction. Then I wanted to give them 5 levels as a story, so they could play through all 5 levels, kind of get an idea of what this story is about, feel a sense of accomplishment, beat a boss, and then they would be in the end game. And then I went ahead and wrote 5 additional challenge levels to kind of give them a taste of what the end game is going to be like. Like, here's a bunch of really challenging levels that are timed, that are more built for speed running. So I'm trying to cater to all the different audiences by building content specifically for them.
Any interest, going forward? Is that kind of what do you think on as far as like showing this off, that kind of concept?
I would love to bring it to PAX. I would love to publicly exhibit it. I'd love to enter it into a few different, I don't know what they're called exactly, competitions maybe. I know they have like different awards ceremonies and stuff, but I would like to play it live. I would love to have a crowd of people watch as somebody was defeated or triumphed over a level. That sounds great. It's going to be a little while before I can really put that all together. Running a Kickstarter right now, trying to get money together to finish the game. So things are kind of tight on the budget side right now.
Oh
Gotcha.
man,
I
just cannot wait for this to get shown off at a show, because I really foresee, you get somebody sitting there like playing the game, and then you have the big TV up here showing what they're doing. Everyone's just gonna be stacked up around them going, "Oh, almost got it." Yeah. Oh, fuck. All right, you got it, bud. Someone's gonna give him a back rub. You're like, all right, that's creepy, but yeah, it's helping. So let's go.
Then I'm in the background and I'm just burning cloth just to show you, like, hey, look at this, like just driving it home, just burning t-shirts.
What's that thing you burn to like free the demons from your house or whatever?
I don't know. Oh, it's like a religious thing that you kind
people
of.
Are,
I don't know. I have some in the back, but
patchouli. I don't know what it is.
You burn patchouli.
Oh man, I just can't wait to see this show.
That's
people just getting amped up behind someone. It's one of those games. Like, it just makes me think of like almost omnibus, or not omnibus, but well, I'm not going to remember the name of that game. Anyway, there was a super hard game I remember to show where everyone was just stacked around it. It's like,
I see.
Man.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, Garrick, it's been an hour here. I really appreciate you taking the time with us, because you mentioned like you're super busy. You're doing this on your own. I mean, that's awesome to take the time to talk with us. So I do really appreciate it. And as much as we can, we're going to be beating the drum and trying to get the word out for LAZR. I want to make sure we get plug some of the actual ways people can find it. So you're on Kickstarter now, LAZR on Kickstarter. Your Twitter is for you is @_MRGRAKA.
Man, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you. I mean, I feel like I'm a fan of hearing these conversations when it comes to indie dev. So, but I think that a lot of people, when they see the people behind the scenes, when they realize the work that goes into it, it just also helps with, understanding the monumental task that is developing a game. Like, it's a big feat.
That title screen alone, which I swear to God, it grabs you immediately, but it's just like so moody with the whole like environment and the circling around. Really, you got the music, like it's. Yeah, that's one person or two people. Nah.
Nice. All right, Garrick. Well, we'll end it there. And
awesome.
So Garrick, thank you for chatting with us. We appreciate it. We'll see you later.
All right. Bye.